Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Vlog number 77. um, I have made a promise to myself to make Sleepy Vlogs more often now. So we'll see. Hopefully I will keep that promise and you will see another Sleepy Vlog pretty soon after this one. Let me start with a public service. Everybody is so excited about this comic, never to be printed again in its original form. So for those of you who would like to see what all the excitement is about, I'm going to show it to you so you will not be left out. The fantastic little Bruce that is just slightly revealed here. Yeah, shocking, I know. Perhaps get my channel censored for pornography. I mean, the truth is, well, first of all, that's a comic marked as an adult comic. Second of all, if my daughter saw that, I would not be at all upset. There's many things in many comic books that my daughter gets upset at seeing, or I would be upset at her seeing. That would not be one of them. So, this is just craziness. I don't really get it at all. How could anyone look at that and say, we need to censor that from, say, what may be being sold as an R-rated comic book or a lot? Big deal. I suppose, did Lee Bermejo just sneak that past and no one was looking closely and it's, lost in the shadows there in the rush to put out the book? Or maybe the editor didn't understand what is allowed and not allowed by DC in an adult comic. So, that craziness aside, I got this in the mail. This was nice from a Kickstarter. It's funny though, I haven't done a huge amount of Kickstarters, but I've done enough Kickstarters that I start losing track of what everything I have backed was. And I think this was one I saw them talking about it on Twitter and took a look and decided to back it. It's called Berserkonaut. So they're letting you know, it says, thanks for backing the comic bub. Keep an eye on your mailbox this Halloween. The comics will ship in October. So that is really nice to get that, because normally with Kickstarter you get what I get is a ton of emails which are telling me about updates and alerts and stuff on the Kickstarter project. And there's too many. I lose track and I don't see the important stuff. And burping out beer. The worst thing that happened to me so far, I mean, there may be a number of projects that just never got completed and I'm not even sure what they were anymore or if I've received messages about them. The worst thing was I backed a set of 3 hardback art books of art of Edgar Rice Burroughs, and I think I backed them for $150. And it's probably been a year or more now. I'm not sure how long. But after a while, I looked back and realized I had missed a message, which was an odd one. I might have seen it flash by and thought, well, that's not for me, because it said you had to pay $25 postage on PayPal, not on Kickstarter. And then I realized, well, everyone else has already gotten their books. So I looked back through and found the PayPal thing, went to the guy's PayPal, put in the $25, put in a note explaining why this was late and that I still need my books. Still haven't gotten those books. So now I have to write a very stern letter to him. What's making me think I've got to really slow down. I've already backed way off of Patreon. I'm just backing one podcast that I feel serves a special purpose and costs the person making the podcast some money. But other than that, I've backed off of the Patreon stuff I used to back, and I think I've got to stop backing so many things on Kickstarter because I'm ripping myself off. But there are some good ones out there. In fact, I just received in the mail this one called The Fist, which is got this really cool art that's very reminiscent of like Space Riders, just kind of very indie, kooky, tattooy, bright colors, black like a black velvet art or something. In fact, let me put the color back on for a second. The Magic. So I haven't read this yet. I just got it in the mail recently, but I'm really looking forward to reading it. It's by a fellow named Justin Kroger, and he delivered it quite quickly, and it's a good deal, plenty to read, so I'm quite happy with that. But what am I it's just one of the things I've been thinking about that I need to pay more attention to. But I'm the one paying money. They should send me postcards like this and stuff. I shouldn't have to struggle to figure out if there's something I missed. Often they make you confirm your address and everything, as if Kickstarter doesn't already have all my information. So anyway, that's one thing I've been thinking about. But part of my wanting to do sleepy vlogs, which I sort of think of as different than my other videos, as something more special. So maybe more connecting to the community is what I really want out of them. So I've been meaning for quite a while to highlight this somewhat new to me person. Now not so new because we've been corresponding on Twitter and comments and stuff. But there's a guy named Dan who does a couple different things. One is he's Dan the Comic Book Concierge. He has a podcast, more burping, called the Comic Book Concierge, which he for a while was doing weekly, and I think he's going to get back to it. But he takes the week's comics and picks as his number one recommendation something you could hop on with that issue, like the best comic you could hop on with the current issue, which I think is a really interesting and useful approach. And then he'll also cover the other sort of comic book highlights of the week. And he's quite insightful and thoughtful, and I really like the way he talks about comics. So to my delight, he's now also started doing videos. His videos are on this channel called the Comic Cast Radio Network. So there's other videos on there, most of them just reposts of podcasts. But his videos are actual videos where he's showing the comic and talking. So if you go to that channel and look for ones that are about individual comics or trades or comic book hauls, those will usually be Dan, and they're really fun to listen to or watch. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. And then I thought, just in general, the comic book YouTube has become so diverse and dispersed and got all these, you might start watching, I've said this before, you might start watching and come across all these very negative channels who have a certain kind of message they want to send out. And you might think that's what all channels are about. But anyway, I feel like the people who are more positive about comics are maybe getting less views than they used to. So I just want to keep highlighting people, new or old. And I don't necessarily know if these people are getting less views than they used to or not. But I just feel like a looping back. Just because someone's been doing it for a while doesn't mean we shouldn't give them a high five and talk about them. So, and actually the first one, I have 3 to do in this Sleepy Vlog, and I'll try to do some every Sleepy Vlog. The first one here is actually someone I've never shouted out before, and I've probably been watching him for about 6 months. His name is Wallace Ryan, and his regular weekly comic book show is called In the Library of Graphic Literature. And he literally has a library of graphic literature. That's a great term, graphic literature. And every week he shows you the brand new omnibuses and trades and hardback collections that he's gotten. He always gets new stuff. He has superb taste, to my point of view, but extremely broad, loves the whole medium of comics. I believe he's owned a comic book store in the past. He's done some comic book art. I should actually look and see if he's published anything that I can get a hold of. He's a quirky and unique individual, but with a lot of cool stuff to say about the art of comics and the history of comics and everything. So check him out. And then someone who I feel like I've known forever now through YouTube, started around the same time as me, ETA Nick. I just want to remind people that there's a great positive comic book channel. He has plenty of viewers. He doesn't need more, but I mean, if you're missing out, check out ETA Nick. I used to call him Eta Nick out of ignorance. But, it's amazing his consistency. I think he does a number of videos, maybe 3 or 4 videos a week. He has different sort of series about different things that he does that pop up when he's in the mood to do it. Sometimes it's celebrate the double page spread or the splash page. He'll show you examples of art that he really loves. Other times it's about collecting, about slabbing, about the comic book market, and more investment kind of talk. Although he doesn't encourage you to invest in comics to make money, but he is interested in that kind of thing and looking at auctions and stuff. So a little bit of stuff for different people. I don't watch everything he does, but a lot of what he does. And I'm not going to listen to every comic book investment channel, but ETA is the guy that I go to. Nick is the guy that I go to for that kind of stuff. And also he does a hangout video every Wednesday, which is also usually very fun, although also focusing, I think, on the investment side for the most part. Completely different, but just as long running, I think, is Earl Grey, who I love. All we ever see of him is his hand and his tea cup, his mug of tea, and he's from Germany. You get some, and each video he does has a focus on an artist, a collection, a story, a character perhaps, and sometimes you learn about American comics, sometimes you're learning about European comics, English comics, whatever. Very eclectic and wonderful channel that anyone who hasn't checked out recently should go back and check out Earl Grey. So I'm asking people to leave me questions on a more regular basis. I did in my last video at the very end ask for questions. So I did get a goodish number of questions. I thought I'd address questions here and just read some of the comments that came with that video. So I hope to, as a regular thing, to have a feedback loop between myself and my commenters, because what I like most, how I measure the success of my videos, is the comments I get. That's kind of the bottom line for me. If I stopped getting comments, I'd probably stop making videos or make a lot less. Although you can see I love to blather about comics, so it's hard to say. But the comments are crucial to me. So the first person that I have here on my list, I don't know if I put them in order, but anyway. The first question I have is from Crouch, another German YouTuber who's had some really good videos. I don't think he's done a whole lot yet. But he asks, which announced collections are you particularly looking forward to? And I look through previews type things for what the new series are in individual issues. I don't pay a lot of attention to what's coming up in collected editions. But I am super excited for Marvel reprinting their early Conan. Now that they have the rights to Conan again, they're going to be doing omnibuses. And I gather with something that recreates the original coloring, because Dark Horse published, what I'm talking about is Conan. They got Conan back. Did I say that? The beer's already going to my head. I have an empty stomach. They're going to be doing an omnibus, or a number of omnibuses, but the one I'm really looking forward to is the omnibus that will have all of the Barry Smith, the first 24 issues of Conan, Marvel Conan, with the incredible evolution of Barry Smith's art, Barry Windsor Smith now's art in those issues. And so I have reprints of those, and I own a lot of the originals, but I'm looking forward to them getting that omnibus treatment. And also I'm looking forward, probably I'm guessing the second volume of the omnibus will be all John Buscema, and I'm looking forward to maybe owning all those in an omnibus edition, because I really like John Buscema's Conan, especially when he first came on it. I think he never got bad, but I think his best work on Conan was in Savage Sword of Conan, and then in those early issues that he did of the Color Conan. That's just a very rough opinion on Conan, Buscema's Conan. I would have to really examine it closely because he had ups and downs. He did some awesome work when he occasionally inked himself. So I wish I could mention other omnibuses or trades that I'm looking forward to, but I can't particularly recall others. I mean, there are various image series that I look forward to getting when they come out, but I don't track when they're going to come out from Image. Anything written by Rick Remender, written by Jonathan Hickman. I think I'll be getting, but I think they're already out, or some of them, this new improved omnibuses of Black Science by Rick Remender, because I love the art there. In fact, I learned about the newer edition from Earl Grey. So Jeremy Klein had some interesting comments that I wanted to relay, even though he didn't ask questions, because I talked about webtoons in the last Sleepy vlog. And he said, nice to see webtoons repped. Hope more creators from the comic world will do series over there so the world can see it's legit. The panel layouts are totally different to take advantage of the scroll. And yeah, I really love that, the way the ones who do it well take advantage of that sort of endless page you have that goes up rather than the flip. I don't want the flip to go away, but I think it's fascinating. So then he has a series he recommends that I was not familiar with on Webtoons that I need to go look up because it sounds great. He says, Dan Schade has just started a great series called Lavender Jack. The titular hero is part V, I assume he means vigilante, part pulp avenger, part superhero, but there's more than that. There's a co-protagonist in the form of a classic sleuth. The series is set in a corner of Europe in an alternate early 20th century, or is it? And our two heroes are being pitted against each other by forces that control society. I love it and look forward to it every Tuesday. And that's another great thing about Webtoons is you get them weekly. I mean, obviously they're shorter usually than a regular comic book, but that something to look forward to each week is really cool. Schade was the artist on Matt Wagner's Spirit a couple of years back, but boy, can he write too. So that's going to the top of my list to look at on Webtoons. I used to read a lot of Webtoons with my daughter, and then she started taking over and reading them by herself. So the only one we still read together is Space Boy because we have the tradition of reading it together. But I need to get on Webtoons and look for stuff for myself, starting with Lavender Jack. I wonder if Lavender Jack has anything to do with Jack the Ripper. Earl Grey says, questions. Since you're an avid sci-fi reader, I'd like to know what's your favorite sci-fi author/story, both in prose and in comics. Phew. So, yeah, I have been reading science fiction even longer than comics. My interest in it is equally intense, although I backed off in recent years, and spending time attempting to be a professional writer in science fiction definitely affected my feelings about the genre, or especially the current writers of the genre. So, so I can't pick a favorite, but I guess the closest to that would be Dune by Frank Herbert. I read that many times during my lifetime. Some people really mock it for its writing style, but I get into it, and I think it's a beautiful bringing together of all the world-building techniques that came up from the golden age of science fiction and the Silver Age. They don't call it the Silver Age, the 50s science fiction too, and he brought it all together, the social and the physical and the sense of scope and everything like that, and did an incredible job of world building that's still kind of the standard that science fiction writers draw upon in science fiction. And an exciting story and an exciting universe that he created. But I wouldn't call him my favorite author. And picking out a single favorite author is really hard. But I would highlight some authors, such as Robert Silverberg, Philip K. Dick, of course, Roger Zelazny, Ursula Le Guin. There's many others. Another favorite novel is Alfred Bester's The Stars My Destination. So I highly recommend that. Hugely influential also. Based on the what is it? The not the Three Musketeers, but the other famous book by that author. The beer really is going to my head. Okay. And then, and you also asked about favorite sci-fi writers in comics. And I would say Jack Kirby, Warren Ellis, which he suggested. Warren Ellis is the writer who most of all has absorbed the lessons of serious science fiction from prose. He probably has read a lot of sci-fi prose and not just watched movies and read comic books. There's some other really good sci-fi out there, and I'm drawing a blank. Brian K. Vaughan is actually a great science fiction writer, too. Especially, I felt, in Why the Last Man. He's kind of very fuzzy science fiction in Saga. Pretty good science fiction in some of his other books. Well, a very good science fiction in Paper Girls, in fact. Very extreme science fiction in Paper Girls. Let's see. And he apologizes if I've said before in a video. I probably said different things in different videos. Lucius Shepard is a favorite short story writer I think I've talked about in other videos. But a lot of what he does is more fantasy than science fiction if one were to divide those two things apart. Max Washington says, I'm very nosy. What is your job? Do you enjoy it? So I just a week ago left my job. I was talking about, I think maybe I'd given notice when I made my last Sleepy blog. And I gave 5 weeks notice because I like everyone I worked with. I thought it was a great group of people. I was very lucky to work for 11 or 12 years at a very mellow, but I mean, everyone worked hard there, but the attitude was mellow and easygoing, and I had a great manager. And the company is an internet company that services in a variety of ways the travel industry, both travel agents who need websites and people selling travel, what we call the travel suppliers, like the cruise lines and the packagers and various other people, and things called travel consortia. We serviced all of those with various kinds of technology services. And I was hired originally there to be an editor, so I did a lot of editing and rewriting, and I slowly became kind of an expert on the company's proprietary software. So more and more I did technical stuff and solved problems or created workarounds and did things for special cases with our software. And the job also involved kind of bits and pieces of web design and that sort of stuff. And for a while, I particularly liked when I was going through the period where I was just learning everything about the software. But then it became very rote, and I got very bored, but I kind of stuck with it. Most of all because I liked the people, and because I had they had a very good vacation plan at least for an American company. So if I had left, I would have had to give up 5 weeks vacation and gone down to 2 weeks vacation, which anyone who has a family can see where you need as much vacation as possible. A family with children, with young children. And then recently I realized I could afford to retire. And I don't really want to be retired, but I have these other things I'd like to try. Maybe I'll go into that a little more later. So that was Max Washington being nosy about my job. So yeah, I did enjoy it. Then I got very bored. But I now that I've been away a week, I already miss the people. I miss just, the small talk. 3 favorite movies. So I'll just have to give you off the top of my head right now. What immediately pops into my head is Excalibur, the John Boorman movie, I think from the early 80s. Could that be 81 or 80 or 82? I just love that movie. I mean, it exists because Star Wars was so popular. Then they were giving more money to movies of this ilk. And John Boorman just has this certain style. I love the visual feel of it. I love the scope and the mythicness of it and the roughness of it too. So that's always been a favorite movie. Another favorite movie was or is The Adventures of Baron Munchausen by Terry Gilliam. And technically that's not his best movie. Like, for instance, Brazil is a much better movie. And he's made some other very good movies. But I just have a special place in my heart for that kind of wacky storytelling, over-the-topness of it. That movie always super charmed me. Let's see, a third favorite movie. Well, let's say my third favorite movie is Stop Making Sense, the movie by Jonathan Demme about the Talking Heads, or presenting a Talking Heads concert. I love music. Concert movies are kind of a cool thing, but usually are disappointing, and that one is amazing. I've watched it many times. Of all the Talking Heads albums, I probably listened to the soundtrack to that more than anything else. Although Fear of Music comes a close second there. Best concert you've ever been to. That is super hard. So I'm a super big music fan, and I used to go to so many concerts. But what does sort of jump into my head is a particular concert of King Sunny Ade, the Nigerian musician, who used to be kind of the most famous African musician in the U.S. He probably isn't anymore. I first learned about him around 1980, I think. Nigerian juju music. That's why it's called King. I think he literally could be a king of some tribe, but also it fits because he was the king of juju music. And he used to tour the United States frequently enough that I saw him about 3 or 4 times. And one time he was playing in this small city kind of south of Portland. One of those towns that has like a couple of free concerts during the summer, just sort of community things where everybody in the town comes and brings a blanket and a picnic and listens to some music. I don't think most of them knew who King Sunny Ade was, or I assume that. And it was just kind of this mellow picnic scene, and then King Sunny Ade's band comes out. It was the largest version of it I can remember. There were probably 20 people on stage, 15 of them drummers probably. So just a wild, but deeply in the groove wall of drumming. And within 2 songs, everybody was up and dancing on their picnic blankets. And he just overwhelmed the audience, or he and his band overwhelmed the audience with this African juju groove that was irresistible, and it was awesome. So that kind of stands out in my mind. But I've been to so many good concerts. It's really hard to pick that one, but I did pick it. So there we go. Thanks for those questions, Max. Oh wait, Max has one more. Wow. This is a hard one, again, off the top of my head, particularly hard. Favorite inkers. Favorite inkers. Now, those are the people who go over the lines of the penciler. And in the great classic inkers add their own style. Some in a subtle way, some in an overwhelming way. Pencilers probably won't be happy, but it's the overwhelming ones that are my favorites, I think. So like Wally Wood, brilliant inker. Great penciler too, but brilliant inker. Anything inked by Wally Wood just has something special going on. One of my favorites, Alfredo Alcala. Some of the most amazing work in Savage Sword of Conan is when he inked over John Buscema. I'm pretty sure from what I've read, John Buscema must have hated that because it had Buscema's storytelling and the flow of his figures, but other than that, it was Alcala, and each panel looked like Alcala had spent a week chiseling it in stone. I mean, they look like the most amazing engravings you've ever seen or something. Joe Sinnett's a great inker. Mike Royer. I could go on and on. I love inkers, which seems trivial, but it's a very important part of comic book reading. Dan Atkins was a great inker, I guess kind of in a Wallywood style. Tom Palmer, who did incredible inking on a lot of people, such as Neil Adams, but most of all, his inking over Gene Colan. They were like the perfect groove, in the groove of art. And Tom Palmer did great inking over John Buscema too. So Tom Palmer is, be fun to sit down and think about, like, who are my top 5 inkers or something. But those are off the top of my head, some of the top ones. And Barry Windsor Smith might get a special mention. Although I love Sal Buscema's inking on Barry Windsor Smith. But Barry Windsor Smith's inking on himself, when he started doing that, and then his inking on Herb Trimpe. They did 4 issues together of Machine Man, and I always remember that. I could go on and on. So next, we got Comic Crack, who said, a new job, which almost sounded like something you're venturing into yourself. Yeah, so I have a 2-year plan. Like I said, I can afford to retire if I have to, if I never get a job again. And I'm very lucky that I'm in that position. But on top of that, my wife's home business is actually taking off. It's skyrocketing. So if we had to, she could probably support us. And but I'm giving myself 2 years to learn and relearn a bunch of software. Like Photoshop. I used to be really good at Photoshop, but that was 15 years ago. And some other kinds of things, aiming towards creating things on tablets for kids. And I don't want to go into it any further because I feel like if I talk about it too much, I might not do it, or I might feel like as I explore the tools, I might shift my gears as to what I really want to do or what I can do. So I don't want to set myself up for failure. And I also don't want to just have so much fun talking about it that I don't do it, which I think I've done with creative things in the past in my life. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. Right now I'm in the middle of starting my own self-training on a bunch of software, and may go back to some programming too, which I've dabbled in the past. I'm not sure how much programming I'll really need to do, but some probably. So yeah, I'm going to stay mysterious beyond that. And if in 2 years I feel like it hasn't succeeded, I will now be able to put on my resume that I know all this extra software that I didn't know before. And so hopefully be able to find a job with as nice a group of people as my last job using that kind of software. We'll see. Or I'll just retire and sit around and read comic books, right? Comic Crack said, starting your own publishing house, I hope. I used to fantasize about, I never thought it would be making a living, but I used to fantasize about starting my own publishing house. But in terms of like publishing science fiction anthologies, prose anthologies and things like that, back when I was very active in the science fiction world. But the publishing world seems so different than it was back when I had those fantasies. I'm not sure how I would go about it. Plus, I'm a little disenchanted with the world of science fiction writers and such, as you may have gathered from some of my other videos, like when I was talking about Harlan Ellison. And then Comic Crack says, no questions from me. Well, I guess I took them as questions anyway, Terrence, so thanks for that. Sarge TD, another favorite guy of mine here who doesn't do videos so often anymore, but cool guy. He said, listen to the end, but I don't have any questions, just a personal note. I got lots of different music CDs thinking I would listen to them when I retired. Been a year and a half and I've yet to start. Maybe tomorrow. Wow, Sarge. Yeah, I guess that's a danger. I have been kind of stockpiling so much stuff, way more than I can read, and I've joked that I will read it someday when I retire. But who knows if that will actually happen. I think I kind of fantasize that, cutting out the commute by doing this working at home that I would wind up reading a lot more of my comics too. We'll see if I can take a few more comic book reading breaks. I'm not sure if that will work out though, because already this week I feel like I've actually read less comics than I have at other weeks. Although I've been kind of crazy with all kinds of errands and odds and ends and talking to insurance and all of that. So maybe when that all settles down, a little more comic book reading time. I used to do a lot of reading on my lunch breaks. But now if I do take lunch breaks, I think I will be trying to get together with friends. I have some friends who work freelance and things like that so that I can get a little bit of a social contact rather than working at home all the time. And let us know, Sarge, if you do finally start listening to those CDs. Maybe having written that down will have been a spur to get you to listen to them. And what are you listening to? I wouldn't mind an occasional music video, or music discussion video thrown in with your comics. Silent Stag has a lot of questions for me. That is Devin, who's had many names before Silent Stag. One of them was Goose, but there were others, and I can't think of them all. But cool guy, a professional filmmaker, so I guess that forces him to a higher standard when he makes videos. But he says, I'm curious about the type of work you do. Be as vague as you'd like if it comes off as too personal of a question. So I guess I've already covered most of that. I can just say that, before the editing type job, I was a freelance writer, writing for newspapers and magazines in the local area, and some national ones that were science fiction magazines or science fiction websites. I made a lot of money during the .com boom writing for websites. I missed that period during a lot of the time that I was a freelance writer, because I'm not super into networking, which is really what you have to do to get a lot of work. I also worked part-time at a press clipping bureau, which meant I was reading lots of newspapers and searching for topics that people had hired us to find. And then there were these Russian ladies who would actually clip the articles and send them off to people. Yeah, that probably didn't make any sense. And I've had a lot of other jobs before then, like working in a computer chip factory and working in a surveyor's crew and all of that kind of things that I did in the past. Where do you store, this is still Silent Stag, where do you store all of your books and comics? Do you have a dedicated room or shelving system? I'd like to turn this into my dedicated room, but it's really kind of a sliver of an office and then a guest bedroom. Matt, Wednesday Serial, stayed in here when he came to go to the convention with me. And my wife wants it to be more of a guest room than an office. So we're thinking about making the basement my office, but I don't think that would be a good place to store comics. So I'm kind of in a conundrum. In our old house, we moved here a year and a half ago. In our old house, we had 3 spare rooms. One was a guest bedroom, one was my office, and one was a further storage room that had comics and a lot of other things in it, like my science fiction book collection. So now I have everything stuffed into a giant closet off the side of our bedroom. And I really can't access it very much. So I'm kind of a little annoyed by that. So we'll see in the future what I can talk my wife into. Another thought was, if we really want to spend money, turn our garage into a studio. That would be my studio. But I'm afraid that's really expensive. Well, I'll have to look into that, though. What are some of your favorite writers, artists, and writer-artist combinations spanning from when you were younger until your current state of youth? Thank you for saying that. I don't think I can, off the top of my head, go all the way through all the evolutions, since I started reading comics in 1971, all the different periods. Let me say there was a period, I think I discovered Will Eisner when was that? 75, 76, probably 76. I discovered the Warren magazine reprinting Will Eisner, and he was the writer-artist. I didn't know at the time he used assistants, but for the most part, he was the writer-artist. And I started developing the idea that the writer-artist was the pure, highest quality creator of comics. And of course, we have that in comic strips and newspapers and everything. And there was Jack Kirby. You know, I cut my teeth to an extent on Commandy and New Gods and all of that Jack Kirby was doing. So, and then Frank Miller came along. So then I thought it was going to be the age of writer-artists. And I still hold those in a special spot, but it doesn't seem like that took off, at least in the American comic scene. So yeah, I mean, Steve Ditko, I guess, was a writer-plotter. That's kind of going off to the side of your question. So in the 70s, I had a lot of favorite artists, a lot of artists that I loved. So I loved it for the art. You know, John Buscema, Barry Windsor Smith, although that was in back issues already. By the time I started reading, Barry Windsor Smith was already on his way out. Neil Adams, Jack Kirby, Mike Plug, Gene Colan. And then I loved when Gene Colan and Marv Wolfman worked together. And then later I loved when Marv Wolfman and George Perez worked together. So those were great teams. Roy Thomas and John Buscema seemed to do a lot of good work together, although Roy Thomas was a good writer with a lot of artists. But it did help having the right artist. Doug Moench was a really good writer. I think whenever I found stuff written by him, I would get excited. I'm trying to think. This is in the 70s we're talking about. I'm trying to think of what other writers. Well, Steve Englehart. Although I think it was only later that I realized I was liking a lot of Steve Englehart written stuff. And then in the early 80s, the moment I discovered Alan Moore, and I really was an early adopter for an American, because they managed to get American distribution for the British magazine Warrior, in which he was doing Marvel Man and V for Vendetta, and I started on the first issue with that. I immediately identified him as the amazing writer, head and shoulders above any other writer. The only writer that seemed to come close was Frank Miller, who at the time was still doing Daredevil as a writer-artist. So maybe Alan Moore shifted me out of that idea that the best thing was the writer-artist. And so I'm trying to after Alan Moore, after discovering Alan Moore, then all the writers sort of were in his shadow. Some people who've come out of his shadow might be Brian K. Vaughan and Warren Ellis, and there's lots of others. I mean, obviously at times Jonathan Hickman and Rick Remender and a bunch of and then people who stuck more to the more traditional superheroes who are still really good are suddenly forgot the name of the guy who does Astro City, Kurt Busiek, although he did a great job in recently in Autumn Lands. Oh, a really good writer-artist right now is Xander Cannon. So that's only a partial answer to that question. I would have to almost take sit down, look through all my comics, write down lists. Maybe I could come back to that someday. I've kind of covered this question and more from Silent Stag from Devin. This one is, what's your connection to writing and art? Have you ever considered doing either? I vaguely remember you saying something about taking writing classes in college. So I did take a little writing in college. In my senior year of college, I was starting to think about being a writer. I was actually a psychology major, and I thought I wanted to be a therapist, but I quickly changed my mind on that, sort of, but too late because I was in college, and I did a lot of volunteering as in halfway houses and counseling kind of hotlines and stuff, and sort of got to a certain point and realized, no, this isn't what I want to do with my life. Although I look back on it now, and maybe I would have made a lot more money. Maybe it would have been easy. Maybe I would have been able to retire even before now. Or maybe not. I don't really know. Because I then sort of pursued this dream of being a science fiction writer, as I referred to. I went to a workshop that was 6 weeks long called the Clarion Writers Workshop, that at the time anyway was the only place to study science fiction writing. And after that, I published some science fiction short stories, but never got anywhere near, being able to make a living off of it. But it did kind of open some little doors that eventually led to my nonfiction writing career. What are things you like to do outside of reading? Biking, hiking, all of those kind of cliched outdoorsy things. I used to do a lot of art, a lot of and actually in your other question you said connection to writing and art. I drew a lot as a kid especially after I discovered comics. And because of comics, I think I became pretty good at anatomy. So when I took some high school and college figure drawing classes, I was always one of the best people at it. And I continued that as a hobby. I would go to open drawing sessions at artist studios, where they hire a model and everyone chips in, and it helps the artist pay the rent on his studio also. And I did that especially through the late 80s and 90s as a hobby, sort of a fun thing. And some of my social life ended up centering around there, where I would make friends with people at these art drawing things and stuff. But and I love science, but that's reading. You asked outside of reading, but every week I read New Scientist magazine, the British. It's kind of like Scientific American, but I don't know. I think it's much better for someone who likes science but is not a scientist and doesn't want to get into all the nitty-gritty of the studies, but is quite scientifically literate. So it gives you a broad view of the various work going on in sciences. And what other hobbies do I have? I mean, I love, as mentioned before, I love going out to live music. Before my daughter was born, I probably saw in various settings live music 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes, especially in summers. Even though I played bass in high school, but I have very little musical talent, and I just wanted to form a punk rock group, and all my friends wanted to play the Beatles. So if I'd been a few years younger, I think it would have been cooler in America. The punk was already big in England, but the Ramones were just becoming known a little bit in the United States at that point. Okay, let's see. I am going to take one more question, and then I think I'm going to take a break and come back to the questions. M. Duffy says, I like your thoughts on Harlan. Oh, this is just a comment. Because I was talking about Harlan Ellison in the last Sleepy vlog. I'm really into contemporaries of his, like Gene Wolfe and R.A. Lafferty, that probably had the opposite personality, but whose work I feel is far superior. I think R.A. Lafferty in particular was extremely humble, and very few people know who he was. But he was one of the great short story writers, a unique voice that has never been imitated and cannot be imitated in a sense. Or if you try, you're not R.A. Lafferty. So I totally agree with M. Duffy's comments. And I guess that's why I wanted to read it. Gene Wolfe is an amazing writer, the writer's writer, they often call him. He's won a ton of awards, but does not seek out the limelight. So he's not well known outside of science fiction itself or the more serious readers of science fiction. He's an amazing short story writer. Some of his novels often come in series, some of which I can get through and some of which I can't. So I used to count him as one of my ultimate favorite writers, but I feel a little guilty because, like, for instance, I didn't get very far through the Book of the Long Sun, which is a 4-book series, which I think is then followed by the 3-book Book of the Short Sun. I do plan to go back to those someday. Yeah, so I'll stop here. The next question coming up, I'll give you a teaser for a Sleepy Vlog 77.5 is from Special Person, who asks, should the direct market be put to rest? So I'll try to give you my thoughts on that in Sleepy Vlog 77.5. Thanks. If you've listened all 50 minutes now, thank you so much. Leave me questions. I will get to them. Talk to you all later.